education in the context of rural areas. As you know that education is, an ability to enhance the social and the economic well-being, not only of the individual, but also that of the nation. And as far as education is concerned, India has been facing an uphill task ever since India gained independence, because the literacy levels were rather poor at that time, and the government has initiated several programs in order to bring up the literacy levels, to increase enrollment and retention at the primary level, to upgrade the secondary and level education. So it has introduced a number of programs for increasing the literacy rate in the country, and yet at the same time the rates are still very dismal, though there have been pockets of improvement in different parts of the country. But before we actually discuss education, let us discuss what is the government's commitment to education. And in this context, I would like to tell you that free and compulsory education to all children up to the age of 14 is a constitutional commitment in India. The Parliament of India has recently passed the Right to Education Act, through which education has become a fundamental right of all children of the age group of 16 to 14 years of age. After launching the National Policy on Education in 1986, the Government of India has made concerted efforts to achieve the goal of education for all by launching several new schemes, including expansion of non-formal education for out-of-school children, improvement of physical facilities in schools, implementation of a micro-planning strategy, and the launch of Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, which is the flagship program of the Government of India for education. The problem of illiteracy was attacked by launching an ambitious new program called the National Literacy Mission. Now, before we discuss anything else relating to education, let us discuss what is the Right to Education Act. And since this is the most recent act in education, it is very pertinent for us to know the finer points of this act. From April 1, 2010, the right to education has come into force, ensuring free education to more than 92 lakh out-of-school children in India. The passage of this act gives every child the right to quality elementary education. The salient features of the Right to Education Act is all children aged 6 to 14 shall have the right to free and compulsory education at a neighborhood school. No direct school fees or indirect cost of uniforms, textbooks, midday meals, transportation need to be borne by the child or parents to obtain elementary education. The government will provide schooling free of cost until the child's elementary education is completed. All schools must comply with certain infrastructure and teacher norms. 2 trained teachers will be provided for every 60 students at the primary level. Schools shall also constitute school management committees, that is the SMCs, comprising of local officials, parents, guardians and teachers. The SMCs will monitor utilization of government grants and the school environment. The Right to Education Act also mandates inclusion of 50% women and parents of children from disadvantaged groups into the school management committees. So these are some of the salient features of the Act, and in context of this Act, there has been a raging debate that has been going on in the country regarding whether it would be implemented in the spirit in which it is intended. Only time will tell whether that will be so. But the intentions of the government are honorable, and they have been included as part of the different features that have been incorporated into the Act. Now let us discuss the national policy on education. As I told you before, the national policy on education was first mooted in 1986 and has given an unqualified priority to the following three programs for eradication of illiteracy, particularly among women. And it entails universalization of elementary education and universal retention of children up to 14 years of age. A systematic program of non-formal education in the educationally backward states. The National Literacy Mission, which aims at making 100 million adults literate by 1997. The major thrust of these programs is on promotion of literacy among women, members belonging to the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, particularly in the rural areas. Now, what were the benefits of national policy on education? As National Policy of Education is also referred to as NPE, the benefits of NPE recognized that the rural areas with poor infrastructure services will not get the benefit of trained and educated youth unless rural-urban disparities are reduced and determined measures were taken to promote diversification of employment opportunities. Pursuant to this, a large number of schemes and programs were launched which predominantly address the educational needs of rural areas, including the technical education. The scheme programs include Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, Midday Meal Scheme, Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalaya Scheme, Mahila Samakhya, and the Scheme of Information and Communication Technology in Schools. It is also known as ICT. The Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalayas have been opened in rural areas specifically in order to provide quality education to rural children. There are other institutions such as Gandhi Gram Rural Institute and the National Council of Rural Institute, which address issues of reducing disparities in education at the rural level. India's primary education. Let's find out what is the situation. Its primary school enrollment has come close to being universal, and current attendance rates as well as literacy rates have risen encouragingly in recent times. So we can say that the programs that have been launched by the government in education sector have definitely achieved some positive impact. However, the situation in other respects leave much to be desired. Some of these aspects are: firstly, secondary school participation is still low and unequally distributed. The economic incentives of acquiring secondary schooling are rather high, and demand also for secondary schooling is high, but it is hindered by inadequate supply of secondary schools and household credit constraints. That is, at the secondary level, when the students are able to acquire that education, they become employable. So for them, it is a good situation to have passed the secondary school examination, but they are hindered and hampered by the fact that sometimes their family may not be able to afford it, and also the school may not be available where they would be able to get secondary education. Second hampering factor is, and rather a deficient area is, that learning achievements in both primary and secondary schooling are rather low because of poor quality of education. It has been found from various studies that even a 6th level student is not able to do simple arithmetic and is not able to understand very simple English. So that is the level of education that is imparted in the rural areas, and that is certainly a matter of concern. Another matter of concern is that school facilities are low and teacher absenteeism is high. Teachers are not accountable to anyone, so normally in the rural areas either they do not like to go, or if they are posted there, then mostly they are absent from the schools, with the result that education suffers. Let's try to make a comparative analysis of the situation regarding primary education in the rural and the urban areas. And the performance evaluation of the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan has shown that access to education in rural areas is only marginally less at 87% compared to 88% in urban areas. The program covers the entire country and all schools except private unaided schools. So we can say with some matter of pride that gradually the urban-rural divide in the matter of education is lessening, and over a period of time it will be reduced even further. Only 7.2% of rural households surveyed reported dropouts, as against 17% in the case of urban areas. So we find that in the case of dropouts, the situation is reversed. Here the rural area is doing better, while in the urban areas there are more dropouts. Moreover, in rural India has been successful in increasing the enrollment of girls under the scheme rather than urban India has been able to do. Enrollment of girls under the scheme for urban areas was 45%, while for rural India it was 47.1%. So in this aspect also rural India has fared better than urban India as far as the enrollment of girls is concerned. In rural areas, 53% of the children who do not go to school are girls, while in urban slums the proportion is slightly higher at 57%. So the programs that the government of India has launched for the rural sector in education have been able to bring about some positive impact, and gradually the rural-urban divide in education is lessening, and in many cases it's even better than the urban areas. On a wider level, the ground reality in education is, as per an independent study commissioned by the Government of India, the number of out-of-school children has decreased from 1.345 crores in 2005 to 81 lakh in 2009. The improvement in gender parity index at elementary level has also has increased from 0.8 in 2001 to 0.93 in 2006-07, which indicates that the improvement of the participation of girls at the elementary level. So more and more girls are now participating and going to school, and they are bringing about an improvement. Published reports also show that there are about 59 million out-of-school children. Enrollment of girls is low. The dropout rate up to class 8 is still high. School-age children work for wages. Rural children have no easy access to schools. Many schools still lack physical facilities, and there is a shortage of teachers and headmasters. So on one hand we see some improvement in the educational level, but at the same time in other pockets there exists deficiency in infrastructure and high dropout rates. Primary education in rural India suffers in the area of infrastructure, as 60% of the schools do not have electricity, while 88% do not have a computer center. Bihar, Assam, West Bengal, and Uttar Pradesh are some states which especially lack in adequate infrastructure. And this is where improvement needs to be done. I'd like to discuss the case study of Uttarakhand and like to tell you that despite being a hilly state, in many areas this state has done rather well. What we find in the case of Uttarakhand, that the literacy rate is higher than the all India rate for the period 1951 to 2001. But the women literacy level was rather dismal during this period. It was 4.78% as against the all India average percentage of 8.86. The male literacy in all 4 districts of Pauri, Almora, Pithoragarh and Rudraprayag is as high as 90%, which is comparable to the literacy levels in Kerala. The female literacy level started improving from 1991 onwards and has now surpassed even the all India levels. The gender gap in the level of literacy has also considerably improved. The difference between male and female literacy rate is 23.75 percentage points, and this gap needs to be reduced, but over a period of time actually it has reduced. It has been reducing, but it needs to be reduced even further. Nainital has the highest literacy rate at 79.6% and Haridwar has the least at 65%. As I told you before, Uttarakhand has a hilly terrain with very scattered population, and it's only 44% of the villages have primary school in the village itself. This definitely is a deficiency which needs to be improved. Another hampering and a hindrance factor to education in Uttarakhand is that 20% of the schools are still run in the open. 3% of the primary schools and 5% of the upper primary schools still need a pakka structure. Over the period of years, the situation regarding infrastructure has improved, yet some of the schools are still running in the open. And what it leads to is that during the monsoon, during the time when it is very hot, normally classes cannot take place, and so the education also suffers in this process. These are some of the infrastructure problems that definitely need to be addressed. Moreover, many schools are being run by single teachers. Also, there is an absence of female teachers, which ultimately leads to female illiteracy, because girls like to study more from female teachers rather than male teachers. Parents are also more comfortable sending their daughters to study at school where female teachers are present, and if that is not the case, then generally the girl children is deprived of education. So the more presence of female teachers would help to correct the situation. Infrastructure gaps have to be reduced if enrollment and quality of education has to be increased. And this is true not only of Uttarakhand but also for rest of the country. Now, one of the most ambitious programs of the Government of India in the field of education has been the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. It's the Government of India's flagship program for achievement of universalization of elementary education in a time-bound manner, as mandated by the 86th Amendment to the Constitution of India, making free and compulsory education a fundamental right for children of 6 to 14 age group. SSA is being implemented in partnership with state governments to cover the entire country and address the needs of 192 million children in 1.1 million habitation. The program seeks to open new schools in those habitations which do not have schooling facilities and strengthen the existing school infrastructure through provision of additional classrooms, toilets, drinking water, maintenance grant, and school improvement grants. The existing schools with inadequate teacher strength are provided with additional teachers. Capacity building of the existing teachers is being done through training. Grants for developing teacher learning materials is being given. Strengthening of academic support structure at the cluster, block and the district level is also being done. So this is a very ambitious program of the government. It has been in existence since 2002, and since then it has brought about significant improvement in the educational levels. But still there is a long way to go. SSA seeks to provide quality elementary education including life skills. SSA has a special focus on girls' education and children with special needs. SSA also seeks to provide computer education to bridge the digital divide. So SSA is having a focus on the girl child. It's having focus on children with special needs, that is children who are disadvantaged, maybe physically challenged. For them, SSA has got special programs and is also focusing on computer education. SSA was formally launched in 2001-2002 and has been financed by a cess on tax on personal income, corporations and services since 2004. India spends about 4% of its GNP on education. In other countries, it is much higher than what India spends. But India is still a developing country. So India is trying to improve through generating funds by levying a tax on personal income. You would have noticed that when you pay for any services or when you pay your income tax, there is a cess which is levied on it, and that is used for providing funds for Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. The evaluation carried out by Planning Commission reveals that the SSA scheme, with an outlay of 13,100 crore, improved its fund utilization levels to 73.6% during 2006-07 from only 50.5% in 2003-2004. So over a period of time, the fund utilization is getting better and better. Most states transfer more than 95% of the funds to the districts, and almost all funds, that is 99% of them, are being utilized. The highest share of funds at the district level is spent on civil works, while expenditure on computer education is the lowest. So most of the funds of SSA are being used in providing infrastructure, that is making drinking water available, constructing toilets, constructing the schools, then providing more facilities at the schools. Most of it is being spent on civil works to make sure that the schools are at least having the infrastructure, basic infrastructure required for proper functioning of the school. And certainly the program has been able to achieve some remarkable outcomes. If we look at the enrollment and dropout rates, we find that at the primary level, the total enrollment was 134.4 million. That is, the net enrollment ratio was 97%. The dropout ratio was 29%. And out of school are 4 million children. At the upper primary level, 53.4 million children totally enrolled, and the net enrollment ratio was 54.5%. The dropout ratio was 51%, and out of school children are 44.6 million. This is as per the MHRD figures which have been given for the Joint Review Mission of Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan 2009. So what we find is at the primary level, the enrollment is much higher. The dropout ratio is also lower. The dropout percentage is also lower. But as the child advances in the number of years of schooling, gradually the net enrollment ratio falls and also the dropout rates become higher. That is, at the higher level, more and more children drop out of school. Regarding technical education plays a vital role in human resource development of the country by creating skilled manpower, enhancing industrial productivity and improving the quality of life. As you know that India is an industrialized country, it is going towards industrialization, and for that more and more technical manpower is needed. And for that, a lot of institutes have been set up in the country which is providing quality manpower for these industrial establishments. Technical education covers courses and programs in engineering, technology, management, architecture, town planning, pharmacy, and applied arts and crafts, hotel management, and catering technology. All this is part of the technical education. The technical education system in the country can be broadly classified into three categories. That is, the central government funded institutions, the state government or state funded institutions, and self-financed institutions. So it's basically at three different type of system that exists within the country regarding technical education, and that is the government funded, the state funded, and the private funded institutions. The technically educated manpower. The technical education and vocational training system in India produces a labor force through a three-tier system. That is, the graduate and postgraduate level specialists. Example, the ones who study at Indian Institute of Technology and Engineering colleges, they are trained as engineers and technologists. At the next level are the diploma level graduates who are trained in polytechnics as technicians and supervisors. At another level are the certificate level craft people trained in ITIs as well as through formal apprenticeships as semi-skilled and skilled workers. So we have the engineers at the IIT level and the engineering colleges. They train to be engineers. At the diploma level, they are trained to be technicians and supervisors, and at the ITI level, they are trained to be semi-skilled and skilled workers. What has been the progress in technical education? In fact, India is one country which is being now cited as one of the best places for technical education, and Indian Institute of Technology are ranked as one of the best institutes around the world. And the setting up of Indian Institutes of Technology, Indian Institutes of Management, and Indian Institute of Science was a major step in the development of technical education in the country. The quality of education of these institutes is of a very high standard and acknowledged as one of the best in the world. However, the challenge of making technical education accessible to the rural populace and other underdeveloped sections of the society has still not been overcome. I'll give you an instance that the nearest ITI for people living in Uttarakhand is Joshimath, which is still a considerable distance from their place of residence. And it is not possible for every child who would like to be trained at the ITI to travel that distance and be able to live in a place far away from his own home. So sometimes, because of these reasons, the people who would want to be trained at these ITIs are not able to get trained. The reason being that it is too far from their place of residence. So more and more ITIs being established in every part of the state, in every part of the country would be a solution to this kind of a problem. Now, as you know that technical education also has to adhere to certain norms, and it is only when they are able to do so that they are accorded a kind of accreditation and recognition by the All India Council for Technical Education, which is popularly known as AICTE. In order to maintain the standard of technical education, a statutory authority called the All India Council for Technical Education was set up in 1945. AICTE is responsible for planning, formulation, and maintenance of norms and standards, quality assurance through accreditation, funding in priority areas, monitoring and evaluation, maintaining parity of certification and awards, and ensuring coordinated and integrated development and management of technical education in the country. So any new institute that is set up has to gain approval from AICTE in order to be able to function, whether it's an engineering institute or a management institute. What is the future of technical education? The Government of India recognizes the importance of technical education. It has already set up some IITs, some IIMs, and other institutions of excellence in the field of technical education. And the government is now keen on developing some more institutes on the line of IITs, IIMs, and Indian Institute of Science. And these are already being set up. The Prime Minister of India has a plan to establish 8 IITs, 7 IIMs, and 5 IISc, that is Indian Institute of Science, to improve the spread and quality of technical education in the country. Some new campuses have already started functioning. These institutes, along with various private institutes and foreign technical colleges, have the potential of making technical education accessible to all sections of the society in India without compromising on the quality of education. As you would have noticed that more and more private funded technical colleges have started coming up in the country, and that is the focus for the government as a private public partnership, that the privately funded institutions are being allowed to set up campuses in India so that more and more children can have access to technical education in the country. When we are talking of education, we also need to talk of the literacy levels. And for that, first we will begin by discussing the National Literacy Mission. It is also known as NLM. The National Literacy Mission came into being on 5th May 1988, whose main focus was adult education. An area-specific, time-bound, volunteer-based campaign approach was implemented, and the community became responsible for running its own development programs and consequently determining its future. Up to November 2002, 587 districts out of 600 in the country were covered under the Total Literacy Campaign, of which 202 districts entered the post-literacy phase and 187 in the continuing education phase. So over a period of time, they gradually progressed from not only the Total Literacy Campaign to the post-literacy phase and the continuing education phase. The National Literacy Mission has delivered creditable performance in the field of literacy, and for this it was also awarded UNESCO's Noma Literacy Prize in 1999. What exactly is the National Literacy Mission? What are its objectives? Let's try to find that out. And what we find is that the National Literacy Mission was restructured on 30th September 1999, and the mission's goal was to attain full literacy, that is, sustainable threshold literacy rate of 75% by 2005. The mission intended to achieve this by imparting functional literacy to non-literates in the 15 to 35 age group. That is, functional literacy basically means that they would be able to understand the very basic letters and the alphabets, and also do simple arithmetic. So that was the purpose, that functional literacy should be there, and gradually once they have achieved that, then they go to the next level of post-literacy campaign. The scope of the program was enlarged to include children in the age group of 9 to 14 years. Earlier it was only in the age group of 15 to 35, but then they increased the age group down to the level from 9 to 14 years as well. It was also increased in areas not covered by non-formal education program to benefit out-of-school children and disadvantaged groups like women, SC, ST, OBC into this program. It was decided to adopt an integrated approach to total literacy and post-literacy programs under one literacy project to achieve continuity, efficiency and convergence, and to minimize unnecessary time lag between the two. That is, those who had already completed one phase went on to the next phase. So there was a total integration from one phase to the other. The post-literacy programs were treated only as a preparatory phase for launching the continuing education with the ultimate aim of creating a learning society. So all these programs at different levels, they were basically there to make sure that every adult in the country was literate, at least had the functional literacy, and then the ones who had attained that, they went on to the next levels, and it was basically to evolve a learning society. The NLM objectives were, in quantitative terms, it seeks to impart functional literacy to all non-literate persons in the 15 to 35 age group, and in qualitative terms, it implies self-reliance in the 3 R's. The 3 R's are reading, writing and arithmetic. It also involved participation in the developmental process, skill improvement to improve the economic status and general well-being, and imbibing values of national integration, conservation of the environment, women's equality, and observance of small family norms. So once the person is educated, then the person can be sensitized towards other aspects of life also, like life skills regarding the country, regarding the ecology, having a small family. So all these different aspects also come into the picture once the person has got basic literacy levels. Now, as far as achieving the objectives of National Literacy Mission, that was done by creating an environment conducive to teaching learning process, provision of good and relevant teaching learning materials, and facilitating teaching learning by good training, media and communication. So on one hand, the environment was built up for a good learning process, teaching learning materials were created, and also the teachers were provided with good training so that they would be able to impart education to the non-literates. Also, the objectives were achieved by improving the pace of learning and injecting confidence among the learners about their potential to learn, and by ensuring that the process was not drudgery. So basically, the learners were provided incentives to learn through good learning material that was provided to them. So it was kind of a joyful learning. It was not a burden for them to learn. Through very interesting learning material was provided to them so that they would be feeling motivated to learn. The objectives were also achieved by integrating basic literacy with post-literacy and continuing education, and by developing the quality of human resources at all levels of functionaries through orientation and training. So it is not just the learners who have to be imparted training and education, but also the functionaries who are dealing in these programs. They also have to be trained from time to time so that they are able to perform their job better. And for that, under NLM, they were provided training. If we look at the literacy rates by the gender, what we find is that this is regarding the census up to 2001. We find that the female literacy level is definitely less than that of the male literacy level. Although over the period of time from 1961 to 2001, the literacy levels have been going up, both for males as well as for females. And consequently, the all India level is also increasing. But what we find is still females are less literate than the male population. As far as the 2001 census shows, the literacy rate in the country increased from 18.33% in 1951 to 65.38% in 2001. Thus, in 5 decades, the literacy percentage grew by 47.5%, or by an average of 9.4% per decade. According to the 2001 census, male literacy was 78.65% and female literacy was 54.16%. So if more females became literate, the overall literacy rate would go up significantly for the country. Regarding adult education, as you know that eradication of illiteracy has been the major national concern of the government ever since independence. And during the first 5-year plan, the program of social education inclusive of literacy was introduced as part of the community development program. There were several other such initiatives by the central and government to promote literacy. And for women, the scheme of functional literacy for adult women started in 1975-76 in the experimental ICDS project areas, and it was gradually expanded in 1981-82. This scheme was known as FLAW, that is Functional Literacy for Adult Women. It was known as FLAW. It aims at enabling illiterate adult women to acquire functional skills along with literacy to promote better awareness of health, hygiene and child care. The implementing agency for adult education is the Directorate of Adult Education. It's a subordinate department of the Department of Elementary Education and Literacy, and has been entrusted with the task of monitoring and evaluating the various literacy programs being launched under the aegis of National Literacy Mission. It also provides technical and resource support to the National Literacy Mission, including media support to enable it to achieve its objectives. So it is the Directorate of Adult Education which is the implementing agency for adult education, and this has been providing various services not only to the program but also to the National Literacy Mission in order to achieve its objectives. Now when we think of education, should we look at it in a wider context in which the same education is given to everyone, or is it that we should have education to suit the local needs? Like if people are able to relate with the education that is being imparted to them, then they would more easily be a part of it, more easily understand it also. So it is very imperative that the education that is given to the children, to adults, to anybody who is being imparted education, it should be relevant for them. They should immediately be able to identify with the kind of education that is being given to them. And so the education should be suitable to the local needs, and the education relating to environment and requirement of the student is more relevant as he can relate to it. For instance, rural artisans, farmers, and those who are involved in daily affairs of rural life are more effective in finding solutions to rural agricultural needs and problems than outside technicians and researchers. So what is needed is that the people who are directly involved with those problems, they are the ones who should be provided the technical inputs and the resource support, so that they would be able to come up with a solution to the problems that they are facing, and they are more adept at doing it rather than somebody coming from outside and giving a solution which may or may not be applicable. So if such a thing is done where the local people are given the technical inputs, then they will innovate more scientifically, and there will be more hits than misses, and the innovation will have a wider reach, because they are so conversant with what is required by them that if they are given the guidance, then they would be able to come up with a solution which is much more easily applicable for them, and something which can be adopted by others also in that area, and on a more wider scale also. So how can education be made more locally suitable? This can be done by the content of the textbook should be indigenized with due regard to local environment and gender dimension. For instance, a flower or any product which grows in a particular area, if that is taken into account while imparting the education, the child will be more attuned to identifying with that product rather than something which grows in Western countries, something which he has never heard about, something he doesn't know what it looks like. Then it would not make the education very interesting. So it should be more made locally relevant by giving due regard to the local environment. It should also be designed and developed in the local language, because what suits one does not suit everyone. As you know, in a language, there can be so many variations, and one thing in one language may mean a totally different thing in another language. So it should be more in the language which is the language of the child who is studying that particular subject. The natural and social environment should be the medium of education. So it is not just classroom teaching that is important, but also the classroom can be outside, they can be taken outside to the natural environment, and then the education which will be provided to them, that will be not only be more meaningful, but also something which they will be able to identify with and always remember. So this kind of education is what is the need of the hour. And also, all the stakeholders should have a say in the education that is imparted. It is not just the policy makers who should decide what kind of education is needed by this section of the society. The people who are getting educated should also have a say in what kind of education do they really require. And once that is done, then it would be much more meaningful and relevant for them. Regarding women's education, we need to first understand what is the national policy for women on education. This was first introduced in 2001, and it says equal access to education for women and girls will be ensured. Special measures will be taken to eliminate discrimination, universalize education, eradicate illiteracy, create a gender-sensitive education system, increase enrollment and retention rates of girls, and improve the quality of education. It also aims at reducing the gender gap in secondary and higher education. Another objective is there would be a special focus on girls and women, especially those belonging to the weaker sections, the SC/ST and the OBC and the minorities. The curricula that would be designed would be gender sensitive at all levels of the education system to eliminate stereotyping. It would ensure that the education that is imparted, it does not involve any stereotyping for women. That, let us say, I'll give you an example, that if in the textbook it shows that women are only good for doing housework, then the children who study such an input, they would have a feeling that women cannot work outside the home, which is not true, because women are now doing so much good work outside, and they've broken every bastion, every male bastion, and they have been able to do very good, perform very well in different spheres of life. So this kind of stereotyping should not be there when the children are imparted education. And this is what is the purpose regarding one of the aims of the national policy on education for women. Regarding women's education, which is stated in the national policy on education, there is a chapter titled Education for Women's Equality, and it states, I quote, education will be used as an agent of basic change in the status of women. In order to neutralize the accumulated distortions of the past, there will be a well-conceived edge in favor of women. The national education system will play a positive interventionist role in the empowerment of women. It will foster the development of new values through redesigned curricula, textbooks, the training and the orientation of teachers, decision makers and administrators, and the active involvement of educational institutions. This will be an act of faith and social engineering. The removal of women's illiteracy and obstacles will receive overriding priority through provision of special support services, setting up of time targets, and effective monitoring. What are the special programs for women in education? The National Policy for Empowerment of Women recognizes their contribution to agriculture and allied sectors in the rural areas. It outlines concentrated efforts to ensure that benefits of training, extension, and various programs also reach them. Accordingly, programs for training women in soil conservation, social forestry, dairy development, and other occupations allied to agriculture like horticulture, livestock, including small animal husbandry, poultry, fisheries for women workers in the agriculture sector, these kind of trainings will be imparted to women. The provision of support services for women like child care facilities, including creche at workplaces and educational institutions, to create an enabling environment for learning. Like for instance, the women should not be hampered that they have to take care of the children, so they cannot acquire education. So the government aims to provide them an enabling environment in which these domestic concerns are taken care of through creches at workplaces and at educational institutions. The program in education for women includes the Sakshar Bharat scheme, which focuses on women's literacy, especially in rural areas. 80% overall literacy is targeted by the end of the 11th plan period. The states and union territory governments have been informed that under the Sakshar Bharat, 70 million non-literates have to be made literate, of which 60 million will be women. That is, the thrust will be on women's education under the scheme of Sakshi Bharat. Regarding vocational training refers to the imparting of specialized skills and knowledge. It is essential for people engaged in dependent employment, self-employment or subsistence work to perform productively and successfully. A better future is possible for rural poor if they are given training to tap other income generating opportunities apart from farming. And for this, they need to be imparted with vocational training. What do we find the situation regarding vocational training and self-employment? There are some interesting statistics. Every year, about 5.5 million students pass out of class 10, of which 3.3 million go to class 12, leaving 2.2 million out of education stream. Those who drop out after class 8 are approximately 20 to 21 million. Urgent attention is needed for this 21 million target group. The available formal training capacity of the country is only 2.3 million students. This leaves a gap of about 18.7 million. The ITI system needs to be revamped to fill this gap. So there is still an urgent need for training these 18.57 million students who are in need of vocational training because they have dropped out of certain years of schooling has been done. They are in need of vocational training so that they would have enhanced their employment capabilities, maybe even open an enterprise of their own. But for that they need vocational training, and yet the training facilities are rather inadequate. So this gap needs to be addressed. When we look at the vocational training in the global context, what we find is that about 95% of the world youth, that is in the age group of 15 to 35 years, they learn vocation, skill or trade with a choice of 3,000 vocational streams. They have the option of choosing from any of the 3,000 streams, vocational streams that are available to them. But in India, we have identified only 1,700 trades, and only 2 to 3% of the youth, that is 15 to 29 years of age, go in for formal vocational training. So on one hand, the number of trades that is available for them to learn is rather limited. It's only 1,700 compared to about more than 3,000 in other countries. And on the other hand, even out of the available resources that they have, only 2 to 3% of the youth actually go in for vocational training. We find that in China has nearly 500,000 senior high secondary vocational schools, whereas we have only 1,500 ITIs and 6,000 vocational educational training schools in all. So you can understand that there is often a comparison between India and China. And here we see that the disparity is so huge. Although our country's population is only second to that of China, yet at the same time, look at the vocational training institutes and the higher secondary vocational schools that they have compared to a country like India, which has only a fraction of the ITIs and the vocational education schools. So here some of the infrastructure gaps need to be addressed. So in conclusion, what are the strategies for education in rural areas? First is expand and upgrade vocational education and training. Secondly, expand and upgrade higher education, higher technical education. Third is promote research in educational institutions which are more practical for the rural areas, redesign the educational pattern at the school level to facilitate skill development. It should not just be plain education, but also it should lead to enhancement of skills which are already present in the children. They can be enhanced. So that kind of education should be provided to the children so that they can enhance their skills. And lastly, make the education relevant for the target group. Thank you very much.